welcome back to the class, everyone. In an ideal perfect world out there, we would all have 8 Galactic Legends and maxed out rosters and only use the 15 best teams every single GAC. Unfortunately, that is just not the reality. Most people out there have 1, 2, 3, 4 or so Galactic Legends, and it becomes crucial specifically for these accounts knowing how to use the bad requirements of those Galactic Legends well. So that's really what today's video is going to expand upon. We are going to go through every single Galactic Legend, or rather the requirements, and talk about some of the characters that might be underrated and or not really being used to their best ability. Again, we're going to kind of stray away from the really good characters. We're not going to be talking about how to use Jedi Knight Luke or Han Solo or any of the characters that are already obviously going to be very good and powerful and kind of have definitive homes. I want to talk about some of the characters that, while you might already understand are really good, they might be underrated as a whole in the community. We need to be using them to our best ability. So we have one line here for essentially each Galactic Legend. Obviously the first one's for Rey, for SLKR, JMLC, and we'll just kind of go in the order that they have been released in. So the first couple of characters I want to talk about when it comes to Rey, and I really feel like that Bernie Sanders meme where he's saying, "I am once again asking you to farm Zorii Bliss." And that's really what this is all about. A lot of people, or most people right now, understand that Zorii is already amazing with Finn and Poe and Resistance Hero Finn. But what I want to really prescribe to everyone out there is Rose is the 4th most important character on the team. A lot of people, and for a while they were probably right, were under the assumption that when you farm Galactic Legend Rey, you have to deal with essentially this worthless piece of a character known as Rose Tico. Ever since Zorii Bliss came out, that has been pretty much entirely false, and it all revolves around the paragraph-long ability that Zorii Bliss has, where she does a ton of things, but one of the most crucial things that we've talked a lot here about on the channel, so you're probably sick of hearing it if you've been here a while, is the fact that she is going to take tenacity up and allow it to spread like wildfire via Rose, and then you will have a chance to inflict exposes when you do any type of damage. This becomes huge, not just because, you know, Resistance Hero Finn can actually deal exposes now, but because any attack that the rest of the group does as well will also have a chance to do that. And that's really how this whole team ticks with OG Finn's lead. He is going to be able to gain turn meter, reduce cooldowns, reduce turn meter, all based off of what those exposes can do. So again, hopefully we'll stop saying it at some point. Don't sleep on Rose. Definitely build Zorii after you complete the Rey farm, and use a lot of these characters that otherwise wouldn't be super great. They can be very powerful in this exact lineup. Next up is going to be what is going to be kind of considered the secondary first order team. Obviously, most people who develop SLKR are going to run typically a full first order. Well, that is not the only option for most people who have a limited roster. That's going to be what you're going to do in the very beginning. That being said, you can still build a pretty decent secondary first order team using the leftovers. And I don't even really like calling them that, because if you have the flexibility to apply either the Phasma Omicron for TW or the GAC Omicron for first order TIE pilots, you will start to see a lot more value again, especially for these limited rosters that only have a handful of GLs and have to be pulling in a lot of these extra characters that you were forced to essentially farm up to be able to get the mainstay characters as well. Phasma's Omicron, and really there's a lot that goes into this in Territory Wars. You can make the team even better by adding in better characters like Hux to cut turn meter. It's a very common counter out there to Star Killer and Mara Jade, as well as Juhani, if you can get everything dialed in well and you give her, you know, or the better premium first order characters. But even without it, it can be a fun offensive team. I wouldn't really recommend it for defense, just because a lot of teams like Grievous will typically mow right over it, or even some of the Hux lead without even having the Phasma Omicron. So a much cheaper team than you had invested would be able to take it out as well. First order TIE pilot Omicron, I do enjoy. I have stopped using this team as my roster has kind of outgrown it in JC, but I used this for a long time, especially on defense. I was able to put crew in instead of first order stormtrooper, and that helped stop a lot of the Wampas out there, given the irresistible stun. But it can be used for some fun things. Does not have a lot of defensive capability in the sense that it can't really take a hit, but it can sure dish some of them out. Next up is going to be the Mon Mothma team. You pretty much get for free when you farm Jedi Master Luke. And I want to just, again, in a very similar vibe to Rose, let people know that Lando really isn't that bad in this comp. And I'm not here to like defend his kit and be like, oh, it's amazing, it's super good. But when you really dig into what Mon Mothma wants for her team, she wants rebel fighters. That is of the utmost importance, because when any rebel fighter is in her team, they're not only going to contribute stats to the team through her leadership here, where they gain, you know, all rebel fighter allies gain 8% of their combined max health, etc. But he's also going to be able to partake in it, and he's going to assist every single time out of turn because of how all the inner workings of this kit works. So you obviously get Wedge and Biggs for free as well. When you do JML, we'll have to pay for them, but you guys know what I mean. And then we're going to throw Kyle Katarn in here as the 5th character. I realize he is not required for Jedi Master Luke, but I would encourage that you farm him up just because he takes the Mon Mothma team to a whole new level. And on top of that, it might even be a really nice door into Starkiller, a next level farm that you could start right after you were done with this one. And again, we do want to advise at least Kyle Katarn here, because if you don't have him, you actually can't fill the full rebel fighter team, you know, minus Mon Mothma, when going after Jedi Master Luke. I see a lot of people putting Princess Leia in here, and while you can do that if you're really strapped in, if you're in the waiting time, I really wouldn't advise it, specifically because Princess Leia herself does not meet the requirements of having the Rebel Fighter tag, which is kind of the whole reason we're talking about Lando here in the first place, is because he does have it. But I digress. So JML, definitely don't let the Mon Mothma team go by the wayside, and don't totally discredit Lando Calrissian as an option. So this is where things are going to take a little bit of a turn for the weird with our good friend Sith Eternal. Not just because we're talking about him, but we're going to suggest using some of his bad requirements under his own leadership. A lot of people out there who have Wat Tambor and don't maybe have a lot of other teams that he needs to be on don't really need to worry about this, or probably have never even thought of this. They just immediately throw C and Wat Tambor against the JML or whatever else they're facing, throw the tank tech on C and beat another high caliber team. But if you can't do that, if you have to throw Watt over to your trench team because you really like how that goes, or you have to put him with SLKR so they cleanse the healing immunity from Lord Vader, this is the completely viable option to take out both Malgus, Malicos, or another variety of teams. It won't work very well against Rey, just to note that. And the whole reason this works is because of how Sith Eternal's kit works, where he is constantly hiding behind his allied Sith, and whenever they die, everyone is getting their full health and full protection right back, which it pretty much buys him enough time to be able to get ultimate, zap enough of the powerful enemies, and call it a day. It is going to have a much lower banner threshold than if you were to say use Watt or a collection of kind of good Sith. But again, the whole point of this strategy, I believe, is a little bit underrated right now. You don't necessarily have to put C with Watt, and you don't necessarily have to put him with really good Sith like Traya, Savage, or any of the other really good Sith Empire teams. Marauder is also quite flexible in a Sith Empire team, but if you don't have that built up, you're kind of out to lunch. And Count Dooku, again, can be used, again, previously what we've mentioned, kind of on a trench team. But for the sake of, if you farmed up C, you don't have that many options, and you're looking for a place to put those characters, you can put them with him. I will say, I should say this pretty strongly, don't put that exact comp on defense. It's actually one of the ones that gets pretty easily beat by Wampa. It's mostly going to be for an offensive viability. If you're wanting to stop Wampa, you're going to have to put something a little bit more expensive like Malik or Savage in there, or even Watt with set so that he constantly cleanses the dot offset and just can't really get anywhere. Next up is going to actually be a 3v3 option for our friend JMK. When it comes to bad requirements that are hard to find a use for JMK, the only ones that really fit the bill are Cody and Clone Sergeant themselves, and they have actually been given a pretty nice use if you were able to build up Captain Rex. And we're going to have a pretty similar tone to Captain Rex as we do with Phoenix, and by that I mean, if you have Gear 9 or Gear 11 Captain Rex, use Gear 9 or Gear 11 Captain Rex. Realistically, if you're not in Kyber 1, 2, or even 3, it's going to trip people up just because of the amount of survivability he's going to add to the team, especially if you have the GAC Omicron, constantly being able to recover when they dip under, and then having 60% max health is kind of a big deal. The Omicron also does add some bonus effects in 3v3 for clone troopers, but I'll be honest, that piece right there entirely isn't what we're after. It's more so all the things that he's letting them do through the rest of his unique that aren't necessarily even attached to the GAC Omicron factor. And next up is going to be more of a disclaimer than it is going to be actual advice. Lord Vader, from my point of view, doesn't really have any bad recs, so we're almost going to be skipping him entirely. If you go through his requirements, the only ones that even come close are Count Dooku and Tarkin is an excellent fleet commander, and you can kind of throw him, I guess, in under the Lord Vader team if you were short on other Empire characters. And Count Dooku we already really covered, but for the most part, Lord Vader's requirement problem has nothing to do with the characters he wants. It has everything to do with the relic level he wants them all at. I love Padme and I love Newt, but for most people out there, you do not need an R8 Padme or an R7 Newt. All that being said, it really doesn't become a huge mystery as to where to use them. You're going to use Padme, you're going to use her in the same place you would use her at R8 as you would use her as R3. The same for Newt, the same for General Skywalker, Zam, the whole Bad Batch team, Embo, etc. Next up is going to be over Jaba. So if you have Jaba built up, you are forced to also go after a group of bounty hunters, Fennec, Aura, Boba Fett, as well as Greedo. And while you could mix in Greedo and Fennec here to some extent, I really do want to take a minute to focus on Aura Singh and her leadership. I have actually used this twice myself in the past week in this 5v5, because she allows for one of the easiest contracts before your enemy team ever even gets a chance to take a turn. And the reason why is because they made her contract so wildly easy to hit. Use an ability while buffed 10 times, and all of our attackers are going to start in stealth, and stealth counts as a buff. This is actually one of the, again, more broken contracts to be able to hit, because you don't even need to deal damage to the enemy. One of the most annoying things out there is when you have everything lined up perfectly, you're going to hit the enemy target, you're going to get contract, and then they dodge. This is essentially dodge proof for the most part. And I have added Boba in here just because he has some nice utility. And then Mando, Grief, and Bosk obviously are not requirements for Jaba, but they really are core to any bounty hunter team out there. One of the ways, or one of the reasons that this works so well is because Bosk and Grief both have mass assists where they call everyone in, which again, while they're all buffed, that is going to get you to a contract really quickly. And the Mandalorian himself, one of the whole perks of getting contract immediately is being able to zap one of the very strong opponents that your enemy team is going to be using. So that's kind of where the dynamic of that team comes up. Again, if you don't have them built up, you can sub in Greedo, you can sub in Fennec. Not bad characters, but you lose a little bit of the overall dynamic. And last but not least is going to be our friend Leia. And Leia, once again, is going to give us the majority of the characters we need to build up a Sana team. Without Sana, Rolo lead, it's really just not all that good. With Sana in there, you add a lot of complicating factors for the enemy team, having to do specifically with her tenacity down, her cleanse, and just the massive amount of turn meter the team is constantly gaining. And Lando, Rolo, as well as Captain Han really do fit the bill for what she wants. The fifth character you're probably going to have to build up on your own. Stormtrooper Han is the best overall fit. If you don't have him, you can also sub in Kara. And if you don't have either of them, you just might have to use one of them under geared. For the most part, that is kind of the team. And once again, once you've already built up Leia, this shouldn't be that hard to go from or go to. And in addition to that, very similar to how when we talked about JML being a stepping stone possibly into Starkiller by building up Kyle Katarn, this in the same form could be a stepping stone into Afra by building up Sana Stars, because pretty much there, you have to farm up Hondo. Awesome character. In addition to that, the droids, which are going to go to Afra anyways. Really, the hardest one to find a spot for is Sana. And if Leia already gave you most of the requirements anyways, then you're looking pretty good. So that is going to be the video for today. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know how else you can use some of the other characters that are really not seen in the best light for the GO requirements. I know we didn't talk about all of them today, like Krennic and Mob Enforcer, but I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Until the next time, stay awesome.